Purity Mukuhi. Diabetes is a medical condition that millions of people all around the world live with every day. The World Diabetes Day is celebrated on 14th November every year, and this year's theme is Family and Diabetes. With me in studio to help me discuss what diabetes is a very lovely lady, and she's also going to help us discuss all we need to know about the World Diabetes Day. Karibu sana.
Thank you, Purity.
And thank you for making time for us today. So first off, let me give you the chance to introduce yourself and tell us what field you're currently practicing in.
Okay. My name is Atieno Jalango. I am a clinical officer specialized in diabetes care and diabetes education. I currently practice in Nairobi, but also lecture in clinical medicine at Kabarak University.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So you have quite a good amount of knowledge on diabetes.
Yes, I could say after 28 years working in the field, but I'm still learning
years.
as well.
Do you know that is older than some of us who we are not mentioning names? But anyway, thank you so much for making time for us today. So first of all, we need to understand what are the statistics about diabetes, globally and maybe locally.
Okay. Around the world, we have over 480 million people living with diabetes. When we come down to Africa, there are about 45 million people in Africa living with diabetes. And we get down to Kenya, where we have about 800,000 people living with diabetes, and of which about 25 to 30,000 are children living with type 1 diabetes, or some with type 2 diabetes as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So those are very high numbers. Why is that the case?
The numbers of diabetes are rising markedly around the world, and this has a relationship with lifestyle and more or less also with environmental factors. We notice that many more people are eating diets that are high in sugar, high in fat. Less people are physically active. As systems change globally, social and economic systems, there is a lot of stress. As families also break down, and the traditional large families also break down into the nuclear families, there are a lot of stresses that are posed to families. And then, of course, notwithstanding the pressures of globalization, bringing in new ideas like the fast foods, the high intake of sugar, and all these serve to fuel diabetes.
Yes. So there are a number of things that are causing this high numbers.
Yes.
And now, what exactly is diabetes to begin with?
Diabetes is a chronic disease. And by chronic, I mean it is a disease that often does not get cured, okay? We've had in the recent past a number of people having the diabetes reversed as newer methods of managing the condition are coming in. But by and large, 99% of people with diabetes will live with it for the rest of their lives. So that is what makes it chronic. It is not an acute illness that you get cured of, but it is something that stays with you more often for the rest of your life once you get it.
Yes. And there are different types, right?
Yes, there are different types of diabetes. The most important thing to first start off from is that diabetes is a genetic disorder. It has a background in our genes. If you were to get diabetes, you need to have the genetic background. So if you were to get type 1 diabetes, which is the first type of diabetes, you have the gene, but the environmental factor that comes in is more often a viral infection that causes an immune confusion in the body.
Yes.
And so when you get this infection, in the process of clearing the infection, the body cannot distinguish between your beta cells that produce insulin, so they are also killed as the virus is being killed. Then you're rendered to have type 1 diabetes. This type of diabetes is often more common in children, though you can find it in older people.
Yes.
Then we have the other type of diabetes that tends to be related a lot with our social habits, what we call lifestyle. And this occurs more often in people who are older, often above the age of 40. But because of the changing lifestyle, the abuse of cigarettes. We have a lot of people taking cigarettes. We have a lot of people abusing alcohol. And then, of course, the stresses of life are increasing in modern times. And then this makes somebody who has a genetic background for type 2 diabetes to express the diabetes.
Okay.
But we realize the difference between type 1 and type 2 is that whereas in type 1 it is due to a viral susceptibility, in type 2 it is the basic problem is insulin resistance. And we find that insulin resistance gets worse with stress. And the second thing that worsens insulin resistance is body mass that is related to fat.
Yes.
So fat is by nature insulin resistant. Then the other type of diabetes that we have is what we call gestational diabetes. This we see in pregnant women when they have they're expectant, and the diabetes is diagnosed for the first time when they're pregnant. And this diabetes, the gestational diabetes can actually recede or go away after pregnancy. But a woman who has suffered from gestational diabetes is at high risk of developing diabetes later in life. Then we have the state where somebody may be transitioning what we call pre-diabetes or impaired glucose tolerance. Again, 40 to 60% of people who cannot handle simple sugars end up having diabetes, but there's a 40 to 50% also who never ever get diabetes. Okay. So those are basically the 4 types of diabetes that you have.
That's type 1, type 2, gestational diabetes, and pre-diabetes.
Yes.
So of all the 4 that we've mentioned, which would you say is the most prevalent and why?
The most prevalent is type 2 diabetes, and that is what is related to lifestyle.
Yes.
Yes, it's the most prevalent in our setup, and just basically because of the way we handle our social lives.
And now, speaking of lifestyle, there's the common assumption that somebody who is obese is the one who's stands a high chance of getting diabetes, which is true, but also you'd be surprised to find somebody who's not as big body-wise with diabetes. So what are the other causes of diabetes?
I like what you've brought up, because many people think that when you're big or fat, you definitely will get diabetes. But you have to remember, diabetes is a genetic disorder. The environment comes in to trigger the gene to express. So having the diabetic gene is like having a loaded gun. Okay? Now, the environmental factors are now what pulls the trigger, and the diabetes expresses. Okay, so you will be at risk of diabetes if, 1, you are overweight, if you have unhealthy eating patterns, especially when you take a lot of fat and a lot of sugar, and then also if you just eat too much than you need for your energy requirements. The other thing is, if you have high stress levels, then you will also be at risk of diabetes. There are certain drugs that you may be prescribed, like steroids, and if you're using them on the long term, then you can be at risk of diabetes. And then the other people who are at great risk of diabetes are people who abuse drugs, people who use tobacco, and then people also who abuse alcohol. That makes you at risk of diabetes. Then the other thing is, as we grow older, the body systems tend to fail. So age is also a factor. So you'll find more people as we age tend to get diabetes, and especially if they have the genetic background. So age is also a factor.
Yes. So there are a number of causes, not just being overweight, not maybe just genes, a number of things come into play.
Correct.
And what signs should we look out for if maybe you suspect somebody might have diabetes?
Yeah. It's important to note that with diabetes, sometimes you may have no symptom at all. You just go, probably you think, oh wow, there's a camp here, there's screening. Why don't I check my sugar? And you can find it's very high. So sometimes you have no symptom at all. So, and yet you have a diabetic process going on. And that is why it is important to check on a yearly basis, even if you don't have the signs and symptoms. Because especially type 2 can take a very prolonged onset, which may be over 10 to 20 years before you actually express the actual symptoms. But the symptoms, what we call the classic symptoms, are passing out too much urine. Then because you are losing too much water, you get insatiable thirst, so excessive thirst. Then because you are not able to use the glucose, because insulin is what makes your body cells access glucose from blood, then you find that you get hunger, excessive hunger, what we call polyphagia. Then the other sign would be changes in your vision. Because when sugar is high, the lens of your eye accumulates water, and then you're not able to focus. Then you may also get illnesses, especially wounds that do not heal easily. That could be a pointer towards diabetes. The other thing that we see a lot in women is they get vaginal thrush. So it's a fungal infection of the private parts, and this could be a pointer towards diabetes. And the other thing that we see very commonly is people coming in complaining of symptoms that keep fleeting. You have a back problem, the feet are aching, the hands the next week. So you have these fleeting symptoms that nobody can put together to make a disease entity. When somebody has some kind of fleeting symptoms, what we refer to normally as the hapa syndrome, that could be a pointer to diabetes. So it's important when you're having such problems to have your blood glucose checked.
And all the signs that you've mentioned, do they apply for babies, or do we have different signs for young ones?
They tend to be different. You have in younger children, because most of them suffer type 1 diabetes, where you have a total insulin lack. When you have your beta cells destroyed in type 1 diabetes, then the disease presents more profoundly. Many of them present in coma. But if it comes in slowly, then you'll see the energy levels of the child goes down. They may become a bit moody, and then passing urine too much. If it's a child that has diapers, then you'll notice that you have to change the diapers often. Or the child is feeding too often, too hungry all the time.
Today we are talking about diabetes and the World Diabetes Day. And you're going on a short break, but when we come back, we get to speak to a patient of diabetes, and we will get to hear his story. Don't go far.
Planning a business meeting or a seminar? Nasese Resource Center is your ideal destination. We have ample spaces for your business meetings, more spaces for your training course, a restaurant, gym, and spacious guest rooms to relax in later in the day. Nasese Resource Center is located at KICD, less than 10 minutes away from Nairobi's CBD. For more information, contact us on 0729 327 331 or email us on reservation@kie.ac.ke.
Welcome back to the program. In case you're just joining us right now, today we are celebrating the World Diabetes Day, and I am joined by a young man who is living with diabetes. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
And thank you for making time for us today.
Thank you.
So I will allow you to introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Tony Kiplimo. I'm a system administrator in one of our local farms in Kenya. And I've been living with type 1 diabetes for 10 years now.
10 years?
Yes, 10 years.
That's type 1 diabetes.
Type 1.
You're very strong, by the way. I think we should just commend you for that, first of all.
Thank you.
And in the first segment, we talked about the different types of diabetes that we have and maybe the predisposing factors. So in terms of diseases, are there any that might predispose you to diabetes?
Oh, yes. Under probably more of type 2 diabetes, we have an entity that's called a secondary diabetes. This is often diabetes that results from somebody having a primary disease.
Yes.
And some of the conditions that give us this kind of diabetes are things such as hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, something called Cushing's syndrome, which is a disorder of the adrenal glands. Then also when you have excess of growth hormone, what can lead to gigantism in children or acromegaly in adults, then you are also at risk of diabetes. When you have what is also called congenital rubella syndrome, a child can express with diabetes. We also have cases whereby even children are not even born but without a pancreas, what is called pancreatic agenesis.
Okay.
They do not develop a pancreas. And then we have things such as rubella, which is referred to as German measles, Klinefelter syndrome, Down syndrome. These are conditions that are closely associated with diabetes.
So you should also be wary of such conditions.
Yes. When you have a child who has such conditions, then you should know they are probably at risk of having diabetes, and therefore you watch out on their lifestyle factors, the food they eat, their activity level, and the stress that they're exposed to.
Okay. And we mentioned that education is a very important part in learning how to deal with diabetes. So, Tony, maybe did you get education about how you're supposed to handle yourself now that you have diabetes, or how did you manage that condition?
It got to a point I needed to learn more about diabetes, because initially when I got diagnosed, I was given pamphlets and handouts just to go and read through, and told that this is what you should eat, this is what you should do. At least that gave me a head start on what I should do with myself. But as you go through with this journey of living with diabetes, you get to understand your body, because we're all different. Myself, I cannot be the same as someone else who's living with his or her diabetes. So I got to understand my body, know what works for me. For example, I know I need to exercise in order for me to keep my sugars in check. If I don't exercise, my sugars will skyrocket and they'll stay up for quite some time. Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Understanding your body and knowing how now to deal with it based on your own body.
Yeah.
And at what point were you diagnosed with diabetes? Was it maybe later on when the condition was really bad, or at what point?
I believe it was 1 week after. 1 week after, because I got these signs of excessive thirst, excessive urination, fatigue, loss of weight, and I just went to my dad and asked him, I'm having this. Then he told me that you could be having diabetes. Let's go and check it out.
Yes.
Yeah, that's when my journey started.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I believe that both as the patient and as the doctor, we both have our responsibilities, or what we should do to sort of manage this condition. So, Tony, what are some of the responsibilities that I have as a patient of diabetes?
You need to be keen with what you eat. You need to be keen with your exercise routine. You need to be keen with what you expose your body to. Let's say, for example, alcohol, cigarettes, and the likes. What else? Yeah,
Yes.
I believe that's the main thing that you should check. Exercise is the key, because you need to exercise at approximately 180 minutes a week. If it's 150, you're good.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yours is in that range, I hope?
100.
You'll get there by faith.
Yes.
And now that we've mentioned the diet, so maybe I'll have you address this. So in terms of what I should eat, what I should not eat, what does a diet for a person with diabetes constitute of?
Basically, the first thing I would state is there is no diet for diabetes, okay? It's a medical myth, it's a social myth, and it has to change. When you have diabetes, you need to have a healthy eating plan. And what do I mean by healthy eating plan?
Yes.
You need to eat a balanced meals, meaning you have to have your carbohydrates, you have to have your proteins, and you have to have your vitamins from your vegetables and your fruits, okay? But at the same time, you need to have just enough carbohydrate. Around 40 to 60% of your plate should be carbohydrate. 20 to 30% should be calories that factor in the fat component, and then the rest are your vegetables. Okay.
Yes.
But when you look at it in terms of amount, if I had an 8-inch plate, half of that plate would be vegetables, a quarter would be starch,
Yes.
and the other quarter would be protein. Okay. So the idea is the main meals, breakfast, lunch, and supper, must be complex, composed of protein, starch, and vegetables. If you cannot afford protein at all means, it's always imperative that you have vegetables at all meals. It really helps control your blood sugar, because vegetables often have fiber. They slow down the rate at which blood glucose is absorbed. So if you're using your medication to boost insulin production, or you're injecting insulin, it is easier to control glucose that is rising in the bloodstream gently.
Yes.
Then the other aspect to eating is working with the body system the way it works. We have an internal system called the circadian cycle. I often call it the body clock. It sets up in the morning and then slowly goes down, and by between 8 and 11 you are in shutdown mode. So you eat the same way. You eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and supper like a pauper. You work with your body, it rewards you. You work against it, it punishes you. And this is so important when you want to control blood sugar. You work with the body, you always get better results.
I think that's a very good strategy which we should actually just take up. Do you use that, Tony?
Yes, I do. Yes, I had to learn the hard way.
So you actually
had
had one
Yeah.
doing, what she has said about your diet.
For sure, for sure. Because there's a time in my life I used to get high sugars of 21, and then immediately I just inject myself. It goes to 2. That's so low.
Yes.
2 mmol. That's so low. Then again I take some biscuit or juice, then it skyrockets up again to around 17. That was my routine. I didn't master my body then, but now after that downfall, I had to bring myself up, and now I'm still learning.
Yeah.
I'm still learning, since it's a learning process, but
Yes, that's
I'm
true.
way better now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there any other responsibility that you might have as a doctor when you're
Yes.
handling a patient of diabetes?
When you're handling a patient with diabetes, as a clinician or as a nurse or a nutritionist, you're a facilitator of care.
Yes.
We have to realize the central place that the person who has diabetes or the child who has diabetes has. And then, of course, their support system, the family or close or their close friends, those are their support system. They need to be incorporated. So the idea is we need to work as a team. It is a team approach to diabetes management. We enable patients to learn knowledge about diabetes. Then secondly, we help them acquire skills. Okay? And before even we do that, we often need to test for their readiness, because sometimes diabetes has a big impact on people's mental wellness.
Yes.
And sometimes the diagnosis of diabetes is depressing, it is stressing, and at that point you don't get much, even if you're educating or imparting skills. So the most important thing is assessing readiness for change, and then coming in with the appropriate changes in small doses when it is appropriate. But most often, always remembering that each diabetic person is a unique person. They are not the same with somebody else who is living with diabetes. So you must tailor your approach to everyone. Understand your patient to impact them. So you learn to teach. Yeah.
Learn to teach.
Yes. So you're a facilitator of care.
Yes.
But always ensure that your patient is well educated when they are ready to receive it, because they'll come to me even just 10 times in a year. But who is managing diabetes 24/7, it's the patient.
Yes.
They need to know and they need to be able to do. Because if they don't, it could be the difference between life and death.
Okay.
Yes.
Very interesting. And there's something else that you've brought out.
Yes.
And that is the role of the family in
Yes.
dealing with this whole situation of diabetes. So, Tony, maybe what impact did your condition have on your family, and how did they help you manage the condition?
I'm glad enough that they took it positively. They gave me the support. I got the medication. I've never missed any medication. Anytime I needed to see the doctor, I went to see the doctor, because I got it when I was still in high school. So I was given a sick leave to go to see the doc and then come back to school. Also, my school played a role, because they had to procure a fridge to store my medicine.
Yes.
So yeah, that was another plus. And yeah, the support of the new diet that they had to get used to, because it takes a whole toll on everyone in the family,
Yes.
just because of that one person who has the condition.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of accessing your treatment, which you said you at least you're able to access it every day,
Yeah.
but then in terms of maybe even financial implications
Yeah.
of their condition,
Yeah.
did that present any challenge to you or even to your family?
At first, it was okay. It was good, since I was still covered by insurance. But now I need to plan myself, since I'm moving out. And now you need to plan yourself ahead. Get an insurance cover.
Yes.
Plan on how you'll get your insulin and how you'll get your supplies on time, because it's a necessity to have an insulin and glucometer strips for a person living with diabetes, because you can't it's like someone driving a car blind to Kisumu.
Yeah.
You need to be aware of where you are. If you get to Enapco, if you get to Eldoret, yeah,
Yes.
such stuff, yeah.
And do you think there's any other role that the family should play in helping manage diabetes?
Yes, apart from the care that they give, they should be the place that the person with diabetes the person who has diabetes can express their feelings. Because if they don't, and this is all bottled up, this could finally end up in depression, okay? And then apart from also giving them the financial help and the shoulder, it is also the family that there needs to be a total change in the lifestyle in the family.
Yes.
Okay, and especially if they were taking foods that were not appropriate, that would hinder his care, things like sugary drinks, use of sugar. Usually it's good if the whole family adopts that. Reason being, apart from supporting him, anybody else in that family is at risk of diabetes. So it is in their best interest to do the changes wholesale. And that is why you find a lot of the changes that we make now take into consideration the family. So there are no special diets that we tend to offer now. Healthy eating, we take into consideration what the family can afford, what is available, and what they like. Because we can do a lot with that, rather than making a huge overhaul that stresses the family. Yeah.
Okay. And now let's talk about the World Diabetes Day, which we are celebrating. So first of all, what is the whole purpose of the World Diabetes Day?
The World Diabetes Day was started by the International Diabetes Federation as a way to advocate for diabetes, to raise awareness and to educate people in the world about the disease that is diabetes, its complications, but most importantly, how we can prevent it, and how, even at a policy level, we can institute changes, such as ensuring that foods that are offered for sale, you know, for commercial sales, and especially the processed foods, are safer, okay? And then in terms of planning our cities, having places where people can play and relax, you know, those policies are critical. And then also to ensure that governments engage in chronic disease management in terms of ensuring their facilities and resources, that people who have diseases like diabetes have access to care.
Yes.
And so World Diabetes Day is about advocacy and education. It's celebrated on the 14th of November each year. And each year it highlights different aspects of diabetes, either the complications, just knowing what diabetes is, or the interactions that diabetes has with different aspects of life.
Yes. And you're a member of Diabetes Kenya and
Yes.
also Tony.
Yeah.
So is there any event that is planned out to celebrate the same?
I'd
And
like
where?
Tony to take this.
Yes.
Because Tony and Regina joined us as our youth leaders, and they're planning something exciting. So I'm not going to take the light on that. Tony, that's to you.
Yes.
We are planning an event on the effect of mental health on people living with diabetes. And this covers everyone in the family, either our siblings, our parents, and our spouses. Because anytime I'm having an issue with my diabetes, it's either my spouse has a problem or I'm also going through a mental issues at that time.
Yes.
So we'd like to cover it as a whole, and we'd like to invite everyone who will be interested in coming for the event. It will be on the 16th of November at Uhuru Gardens, and come, let's have fun. It will start from 12 to 6.
We have been talking about the World Diabetes Day, and in line with that, we'll be having an event at Uhuru Gardens on the 16th of November 2019 from 12 to 6 p.m. And also remember to come dressed in a touch of blue. I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for making time for us today. Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
Atieno.